Today I'm going to talk about the elements of poetry. Before I go over the specific elements of poetry, I want to encourage everyone to remember the elements of fiction, okay? The things like setting, plot, and character, those devices can still apply to poetry. For example, a poem can have a setting. You could argue that a poem has a character, and you can argue that there's a beginning, middle, and end to some poems. Okay, so don't just disregard the elements of fiction. Keep the elements of fiction in your mind as you read poetry. And I'm going to go over some of the devices that poets use right now. When we read poetry, we read the voice, the speaker, and the tone. Now, one can argue that the poem's speaker is also the narrator, but in general, we refer to the speaker of the poem when we talk about poetry. Now, the speaker is that voice, okay? When we hear the speaker's voice, we hear the speaker's tone and feeling, and ultimately, we can find meaning from that. So when we read a poem, we're looking for, does the speaker sound sad? Does the speaker sound forlorn? Does the speaker sound joyous? Does the speaker sound hateful? So we're looking for maybe words or images that help us understand what that speaker's tone is, okay? And from that tone, we can discern meaning. Now, when a speaker addresses a specific silent listener, so when there's a poem and it's as though the speaker is speaking to someone, we call that a dramatic monologue. And a great example of a dramatic monologue is My Last Duchess. Okay, so I highly recommend when you read My Last Duchess, think of that as the speaker speaking to a specific person. All right? I'm going to be biased for a second. I love diction. Diction is probably one of my favorite literary devices because I love words. I like that words have denotations as well as connotations. A denotation is the dictionary definition of a word, and the connotation is the feeling of the word, the implied idea inside that word. For example, take the word night. Well, what is the night? Literally, it's the time of the day, or evening, where the sun goes down and the moon comes up, the stars come up. What's your connotation of the word night? For me, I do not like the night. I get nervous about what's going to happen. I don't like the dark. It makes me, can't see clearly. I am not someone who likes the night. My parents always taught me that nothing good happens after midnight, and that idea has always stuck with me. But I know a lot of people who love the night, who thrive at night, who the moon gives them energy. They get the most work done at night. Well, that's just not me. I'm a morning person. So a lot of us have different connotations of the word night. And when you write about literature, and there's a word in the poem or short story or play that jumps out at you, ask yourself, what does it literally mean and what does it imply? And what the word implies is key. That's the kind of like the golden nugget of the word. Figurative language. So when we use figurative language, we mean something other than the actual meaning of words. And I know this can be very frustrating for a lot of people, this idea that the literal is not all there is. But that's kind of the secret to literature. Great literature is a vault, and you are a detective trying to figure out where the key is to that vault, and you have to find all the clues. And when you can unlock that door to the vault, you get this rich pot of gold inside. Okay? So you want to think of a figure of speech as this just another way to convey a literal idea, but it has layers. And inside that layer is this awesome idea that helps us understand the world. So there are different types of figures of speech. There's hyperbole, personification, simile, and metaphor. Hyperbole is an exaggeration. So for example, when you say, "It's so hot outside, I am melting." Well, that is a gross exaggeration. You're not literally melting. You're not the Wicked Witch of the West. from The Wizard of Oz, okay? When you say, I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. Well, I don't really think you're actually going to eat a horse. It's just an exaggeration. Personification is when we give inanimate objects or an abstract idea some sort of animate characteristic. For example, if you read love, and love is a beast lurking in the shadows waiting to jump and attack, well, love is an abstract idea that it doesn't have a body and it can't lurk in the shadows. But the author in that instance would be trying to convey this idea that love is like a predator, that it's dangerous, that it can attack. So it's enhancing the meaning that love is not so rainbows, okay? It's not all easy and simple. Now, a simile and a metaphor. Now, a simile is when you would say something like, Rachel's smile is like a rose. And the metaphor is when you say, Rachel's smile is a rose, okay? So again, these are just another way for an author to convey an idea. So you have the literal presentation of the image, and then you have the deeper meaning. It's sort of the layers to that literal. Symbolism and allegory. So a symbol is an object or action that represents something beyond itself. And I know this is very frustrating for a lot of people. Literature's not literal, okay? If there's a red ball in the poem or in the short story or in the play, it's not just a red ball. It means something else, okay? It could mean a ball of hatred, a ball of rage, a ball of passion. It could mean anything, really. It depends on what else is going on in the story, but you have to figure out, what does it mean, the secondary meaning, all right? The literal is just the beginning in great literature. You have to find what the symbol means. Now, an allegory is a form of narrative in which people, places, or happenings have hidden or symbolic meanings. So great myths are symbolic, all right? They're allegories. They tell a literal story, but that literal story is standing for something else, okay? And again, I know that's really frustrating for a lot of people. You want things to be literal, but they're just not, all right? Literature is meant to be a puzzle, and you need to find what things are meaning, what they mean, what their hidden meaning is. So when you think about syntax, I recommend thinking about grammar. What grammatical choices has the author made? Does the author start sentences with prepositional phrases? Does the author constantly use because clauses? What is the grammatical structure of the sentences? Because that grammatical structure hints at the poem's tone or the speaker's state of mind, okay? So you want to think about just the organization of the poem's sentences, or lines is a better way to put it. What do the lines look like? Do they have a pattern? Do they feel stilted? Do they feel rhythmic? Do they feel sad? Do they feel jarring? Right? So just think about the grammar, the word choices, and the way the words are positioned. All right? That's syntax. Sound is so important in poetry. Poetry is meant to be spoken. It is meant to be heard. A poetry teacher told me in college that I should go into a bathroom with no carpet and read a poem 3 to 4 times out loud. Now, why the bathroom? Because the bathroom has interesting acoustics. All right. You want to go to a place where words can vibrate off walls, where the sounds can really be heard clearly. So you want to go into a room with no carpet and have the room has sort of these walls that sound bounces off of. So an author makes very interesting choices with words to make sounds. Okay. Obviously, there's rhyme where the final vowel or consonant sounds sort of repeat. Alliteration is the repetition of consonant sounds, especially at the beginning of words. For example, the Pied Piper plays piano, right? Every word starts with a P. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds, okay? So it's all about repetition. It's all about feeling and rhythm and how do the words sound? And that sound, what is it sounding like Does it sound like a car zooming on the street? Does it sound like a car crushing leaves on the street? Does it sound like horses' hooves going down a street? Does it sound like a child screaming? Right? What is this sort of sound of the words, the collection of sounds? What is it making you think of? And that is why sound is important. So finding the rhythm and the meter of a poetry line or stanza is difficult, okay? It really is. I posted a video on how to find poetic meter, so I highly recommend watching that video. It's a very good video to help you see how you're supposed to count syllables, okay? So in order to find the meter, we divide a unit of meter into feet, and a foot of poetry is the unit of measure consisting of stressed and unstressed syllables. Okay, and again, that gets kind of confusing. I'm going to be honest with you, I get confused by meter as well. But if you just think of meter as this measure of patterns, okay, you're trying to count the way we stress the words. Do we stress the beginning of the word or do we stress the end of the word? And does the author couple words together where they're always stressed at the end or they're always stressed at the beginning? Okay, and you're trying to find this rhythm, and you want to think of rhythm as like a drum beat. So how do the words create a feeling in this beat? All right, so when you're reading a poem, read it out loud and feel the energy in how the words are rolling and sounding. All right, are they stressed at the beginning or are they stressed at the end? And then what's the pattern in that? Is the pattern that most of the words are stressed at the end or at the beginning? All right. So one way to categorize poems is whether or not it's a closed form or an open form poem. A fixed poem has an obvious structure. We recognize closed form or fixed form by their patterns of rhythm, rhyme, meter, and repetition. The poems reveal their structure through sight and sound. We can see the length and patterns of the lines, and we can hear and feel their metrical beat. Okay, so think of it as a sonnet. A sonnet is a closed form poem. A villanelle is a closed form poem. These are just types of closed forms, meaning they have the same structure. Every sonnet has the same structure. Every villanelle has the same structure, okay? Open form is a looser form of poetry. Now, but please note, open or free form does not mean formless. Instead, the poem is creating his or her own form, and he or she might be playing with form, okay? Most modern poetry is free form or open form. Authors are playing with structure. I would argue that poems before 1950, before 1920, those tend to be closed form just because people liked that structure. They liked working with a fixed idea. They had to, their rhythm has to be a certain way. The number of syllables per line has to be a certain count, okay? Open form is just a little bit more free, all right? You want to think of it maybe as a little bit more modern. All right, theme. Theme is so important in literature. Theme is an idea or meaning inherent and implicit in a literary work. Once we discover the literature's theme, we must start to ask what the author is saying about that theme. We must find the elements of fiction, poetry, and drama that are used to help convey the theme and its implications. So if we notice that a story is about love, so one of the major themes is love, well, we have to ask, what is the story saying about love? If the story is about religion, what is the story saying about religion? Religion is that sort of that topic, but you need to start asking questions. What are we saying about that theme? What are we saying about the meaning? Okay? So theme, it's so important. It's what the story's about.